Hello, my name is Philippe Girard, a professor in the history department at McNeese State University.
And I'm Rachel Zachary. I'm from Political Science Department at McNeese. Welcome to Your Grandma Rocks, where we explore the lives of famous women in history.
Welcome and bienvenue à nos amis francophones. Vous écoutez la radio de l'Université McNeese.
On the program today, Music and History, as we retrace the life of a remarkable woman. She was a poor girl from Ireland.
Or maybe not.
She was a courtesan.
Unless she wasn't.
She was the first lady of Paraguay.
Well, not officially.
She was both a hero and a reviled figure.
That one's for sure. Her name was Eliza Lynch.
Along the way, we'll sample some music from the island of her birth, Ireland, and the two countries she loved most, France and Paraguay, and a lot of songs by women named Eliza.
We'll start with another lady from Ireland who left us much too soon. Bonjour and welcome back to Your Grandma Rocks. We just listened to Zombie by the Cranberries. Je m'appelle Philippe Girard.
And I'm Rachel Zachary. Today we're exploring the life of the First Lady of Paraguay, Eliza Lynch.
Who, strangely enough, was not from Paraguay.
Just like the band we just heard, she hailed from Ireland. She was born in 1833 in County Cork.
There are a lot of myths about her life. One is that she grew up in extreme poverty, when in fact her dad was a doctor. But a rags to riches story makes for a better tale.
Ireland, however, was poor. This was the area of the Great Potato Famine. So at the age of 10, after her dad died, she and her mother moved to France.
That is where Eliza met and married her first husband, a French army officer.
She followed him to his post in French Algeria, but never cared much for him. So one day she fled the barracks of Algeria and headed back to Paris to pursue a life of her own.
That is where things get murky. According to most stories, she made a living by prostituting herself to older men from the Parisian aristocracy.
And it would have made sense. By that time, her father had died and she had left her husband. Being a kept woman was one way to make a living.
Either that or the story was invented later on by her enemies in order to tarnish her reputation.
We did a show on Eva Perón, the First Lady of Argentina, whose life was very similar. Like Eliza Lynch, she went to the big city at an early age and supposedly supported herself through prostitution.
Either way, it was in Paris in the 1850s that Eliza Lynch met the man of her life, General Francisco Solano Lopez.
He was the son of the dictator of Paraguay.
I teach Latin American history at McNeese, and Paraguay is a country with a really unique history. Because it's landlocked, it was a backwater in Spanish colonial times. But it did pretty well after independence, in part because it was so stable politically speaking. It basically had 3 leaders in 60 years. José Rodríguez de Francia, 1813 to 1840, and then Carlos López, 1841 to 1862, and then our man, Francisco López, 1862 to 1870.
3 rulers over 60 years? That's not much. In Mexico, General Santa Anna alone went in and out of power 11 times in just 22 years.
Well, Mexico was quite the story in the 19th century. Those leaders of Paraguay are controversial to this day. On the one hand, they were dictators who allowed no dissent and created a quasi-communist political regime that was closed to the outside world.
Like North Korea today.
Kinda. On the other hand, the country was generally prosperous despite its isolation, and the local Guarani population of Indians was much better treated than the other Indians of the Americas.
As far as Eliza Lynch was concerned, this didn't matter. She fell in love with Francisco Lopez, the dictator's son.
He is often portrayed as short and swarthy.
The implication being that she only cared for him because of the money?
Exactly. Also, this turned their relationship into a Beauty and the Beast kind of scenario, which makes for great drama.
And is slightly offensive. After all, the beauty is played by a light-skinned European from Paris who brings culture to a beastly dark man from the wilds of South America.
National stereotypes definitely play a role in the way the two are usually described.
Can we pause for a song? I remember you promising us a French song at some point.
You are correct. Our next song is by one of my favorite singers, Serge Gainsbourg. And the song is entitled, of course, Eliza.
Eliza, 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 saute-moi au cou. Eliza, 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 cherche-moi des poux. Enfonce bien tes ongles et tes doigts délicats dans la jungle de mes cheveux. Elisa, 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 saute-moi au cou. Elisa, 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 cherche-moi des poux, fais-moi quelques anglaises et l'arrêt au milieu. On a 13, 14 ans à nous deux. Elisa, 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 les autres on s'en fout. Elisa, 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 rien que toi, moi, nous, tes 20 ans et 40. Si tu crois que cela me tourmente, oh non, vraiment, Elisa. Elisa, 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 saute-moi au cou. Elisa, 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 cherche-moi des poux. Enfonce bien tes ongles et tes doigts délicats dans la jungle de mes cheveux. Elisa.
Welcome back. I'm Rachel Zachary, co-host of Your Grandma Rocks, your favorite women's history show on KBYS.
Et je suis Philippe Girard. Nous venons d'entendre Eliza par Serge Gainsbourg. Vous écoutez la radio de l'Université McNeese.
Today we retrace the life of a fascinating woman, Eliza Lynch, a young lady from Ireland who spent the time in 1850s at a courtesan in Paris.
Before our break, she had met and fallen in love with General Francisco Lopez, the son of the dictator of Paraguay. He was just as smitten as she was, and the two went back together to Paraguay, where he succeeded his father in office in 1862.
Which is where she got her title of the First Lady of Paraguay.
Though technically they never married.
Is it because she couldn't divorce her first husband, the French officer?
No, she managed to get her first marriage annulled by the Catholic Church on the ground that they never conceived a child, so she could have remarried. My guess is that he didn't want to appear unpatriotic by marrying a foreigner.
Either that, or she didn't want to lose her freedom again.
Maybe so. A lot of the independent women we have profiled on the show chose to remain single. The legal system was not favorable to married women in the 19th century.
But their union, or whatever you call it, was a real one. Eliza and Francisco had 7 children in all.
As First Lady, she hosted elaborate parties and banquets where she introduced European culture to a remote region of South America.
At least that's how the Beauty and the Beast narratives portray it.
Right. Some accounts claim that she was detested by the elite because she associated with the little people of Paraguay.
A bit like Eva Perón from Argentina?
Yes. Again, their two lives have a lot in common, including how much these two women were loved and hated with excess.
Her critics called her greedy and ambitious.
Well, she did get rich as a First Lady. At her peak, she owned land equivalent to 1.5 times the size of her native Ireland.
Wow, not bad for a woman who left the Great Potato Famine as a 10-year-old.
As far as political ambition goes, she claimed that she never meddled in politics, but her critics accuse her of being the one who pushed her husband into some disastrous choices.
Isn't it funny how whenever a dictator or king makes a mistake, it's always on the fault of his advisors, or especially their wife?
There's definitely that tension. Women's roles were narrowly defined in the Victorian age, so women who stepped out of those roles were often singled out for criticism.
Well-behaved women don't make history, they say. But it seems that ambitious women get criticized for making history too. What's the music like in Paraguay? I must confess I don't know anything about it.
Same here. I had to do some background research when preparing for the show. I found a heavy metal band called Flu, which is quite good if you like that style of music.
Paraguayan heavy metal? I assume that didn't exist in Eliza's time?
No, the traditional folk music is the Paraguayan polka, which is apparently great if you like to dance.
Did she ever dance it?
Maybe. The polka was first introduced to Paraguay in 1858, so right when she first settled there. But she always regarded herself as an English woman and a representative of high Parisian culture.
So a folk dance for country people wasn't exactly her style.
No, otherwise the great national composer of Paraguay is José Asunción Flores. He was a creator of a whole new genre of music, the guarania.
What's it like?
These are beautiful songs. They're slow and melodic, kind of like love ballads.
Let's listen to one then.
All right, that guarania originated in 1925. We will listen to a much more modern take, Mis Noches Sin Ti by Paiko.
Que el destino logró separarnos. Guardo tan bellos recuerdos que no olvidaré. Sueños que juntas forjaron tu alma y la mía. Y en las horas de dicha infinita que añoro en mi canto y no han de volver. Solo quedó tu recuerdo. Siento en mis labios tus besos, dulces vaporú. Tu cabellera sedosa acaricio en mis sueños y me estrechan tus brazos amantes al arrullo suave de tu cunú. Corazón en tiniebla te
busca con ansias. Rezo tu nombre pidiendo que vuelvas a mí. Porque sin ti ya ni el sol ilumina mis días. Y al llegar la aurora me encuentra llorando mis noches sin ti. En tiniebla te busca con ansias. Rezo tu nombre pidiendo que vuelvas a mí. Porque sin ti ya ni el sol ilumina mis días. Y al llegar la aurora me encuentra llorando mis noches sin ti.
Bonjour à tous, and welcome back to Your Grammar Rocks on KBYS. Je suis Philippe Girard.
And I'm Rachel Zachary. Today we're covering the life of Eliza Lynch, an Irish-born woman who became, improbably, the First Lady of Paraguay in the 1860s.
Our story is about to take a sad turn.
Uh-oh, that always seems to happen on this show.
Sorry, can't change the history. I gotta stick to what actually happened.
I assume you're referring to the War of the Triple Alliance?
Correct. That's the war that began in 1864 and pitted Paraguay against, you guessed it, 3 different countries.
Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil. And if you look at the map, are far larger and more populated than Paraguay. Definitely not a good idea to get in a fight with all 3 of them at once.
Eliza Lynch is often blamed for inciting her husband to start the war.
Of course, blame the woman.
But scholars usually mention various territorial disputes as the real cause.
What's not in dispute of the toll of the war exacted in the population of Paraguay?
The people of Paraguay fought bravely against overwhelming odds, long after it was obvious that they could not win.
As a result, it's estimated that 70% of the country's population died in the war. That's right, 70%. It was possibly the costliest war in world history relative to the home population.
The draft age population was pretty much wiped out. In a census taken after the war, there were only 221,000 people left in Paraguay, and of those, only 28,000 were adult men.
The war also took a psychological toll on dictator Lopez, who became increasingly paranoid and began executing any suspected rival in a series of show trials.
Still, Eliza stood by her man in those dark times. She followed him all the way to the last battle of the war at Cerro Cora, where General Lopez died heroically.
Eliza's 15-year-old son, who had become promoted as colonel during the war, also fought in the battle. He refused to surrender at the end of the battle and was shot.
In Paraguay, those events are remembered as examples of heroic patriotism to this day. So is Eliza's attitude. She reclaimed the bodies of her husband and her son with great dignity, and then buried both of them with her bare hands.
Wow, that's pretty dark. Talk about a downfall. From the First Lady of Paraguay to burying your son in the middle of a battlefield. Can we listen to a happy song now?
I've got just what you need. It's by a British singer who goes by the stage name Eliza Doolittle.
I know her. She does light happy pop, a bit like Meghan Trainor.
Here is Skinny Jeans by Eliza Doolittle.
Stinging me with your attitude. I got the mind
Skinny Jeans by British singer Eliza Doolittle. You're listening to Your Grandma Rocks on KBYS. I'm Rachel Zachary.
Et je suis Philippe Girard. Vous écoutez la radio de l'Université McNeese.
Today we are retracing the life of Eliza Lynch, an Irish-born woman who served as First Lady of Paraguay until the country's disastrous defeat in the War of the Triple Alliance in 1870.
After that defeat, she was captured and exiled by the new government. She tried to return 5 years later to reclaim her extensive properties, only to be banished again.
So it was in Paris that the former Queen of Paraguay, as she was nicknamed, spent her last years.
By that point, Brazil had begun shaping the way the public saw Eliza Lynch.
History is written by winners, as always.
As always.
Brazil had a lot to atone for the genocidal campaign that it waged in Paraguay, so the country needed to blame Paraguay for starting the war, or even better, to blame a foreigner. And there was the image of Eliza Lynch as a gold-digging prostitute who had pushed her husband into starting the war.
She fought back by publishing a book claiming that she had played no role in politics and instead cared for the wounded. But the reputation stuck.
Her reputation is still in the tatters as she died in exile in Paris in 1886 at the age of 53.
Some historians keep describing her in unflattering ways. She was profiled in a 1995 book entitled The World's Wickedest Woman, for example.
But over the years, historians began dismissing several of the myths about her life. That's especially true in Paraguay, where she seems to be seen as a national heroine.
They even dug up her body so that she could be brought back to Paraguay and buried in the national cemetery.
Again, like Eva Perón, her body was also sent back from Europe to Argentina after her death.
Eliza Lynch has also become a bit of a cult figure in Ireland, where there is a festival in her honor every year in her hometown.
Pope Francis, who is also from Argentina, was a fan. He even suggested that Eliza should be awarded a Nobel Peace Prize.
Which, sad to say, will never happen. You have to be alive to get the Nobel Prize. You can't get it posthumously.
Do we have time for another song?
We do. It's another Eliza Doolittle song.
Again?
I mean, not Eliza Doolittle, the contemporary pop singer, but Eliza Doolittle, the character in My Fair Lady.
A song by Audrey Hepburn, then?
Almost. Marnie Nixon was actually the one doing all of Hepburn's singing lines in the movie. Listen closely, you can notice the voice changing a little bit when the movie switches from speaking lines by Audrey Hepburn to actual singing. Nixon did that for a lot of big stars in the golden age of Hollywood, though she didn't get recognized in the credits.
Yet another woman who didn't get the recognition she deserved. We'll have to do another show about her.
We will. In the meantime, here is I Could Have Danced All Night from My Fair Lady.
Bed, I couldn't go to bed. My head's too light to try to set it down. Sleep, I couldn't sleep tonight. Not for all the jewels in the crown. I could have danced all night. I could have danced all night and still have begged for more. I could have spread my wings and done 1,000 things I've never done before. I'll never know what made it so exciting. Why all at once my heart took flight. I only know when he began to dance with me, I could have danced all night.
It's after 3 now. Don't you agree now? She ought to be in bed.
I could have danced all night. I could have danced all night and still
Now say good night. Please turn out the light. Please, it's really time for you to be in bed.
I could have
To come
spread
along,
my
to get
wings
your
and done
toad.
1,000
Or Mrs. Pierce
things
is apt to scold.
I've
You're up too late.
never
Miss, and sure as
done
fate, Miss, you'll catch a
before. I'll never know what made it so exciting. Why all at once my heart took flight. I only know
Put down your book.
when he
The work will keep.
began to
Now settle down
dance with me.
and melt your sleep.
I could have danced
dear, but now it's time to sleep. I could have danced all night, I could have danced all night, and still have begged for more. I could have spread my wings and done 1,000 things I've never done before. I never know what made it so exciting. Why all at once my heart took flight. I only know when he began to dance with me, I could have danced, danced, danced all night.
Bienvenue à tous, je m'appelle Philippe Girard.
And I'm Rachel Zachary. You're listening to Your Grandma Rocks on KBYS, a show about famous women from centuries past.
We just listened to one of Eliza Doolittle's songs in My Fair Lady, sung by Audrey Hepburn and Monty Nixon.
Today we retrace the life of another self-made woman named Eliza Lynch, who had an incredible life from Ireland where she was born to Paraguay, where she achieved fame and love.
Along the way, she remained a resourceful woman who charted her way through the Irish potato famine and the terrible war of the Triple Alliance in South America.
She lost the agency after her death, when her life was reinvented and dissected by historians trying to prove a political point at her expense.
Until other historians, and that would be us, came in to save the day and rehabilitate her memory.
Yay for us! Anyway, what a life. We're glad we got to share it with you.
Quelle vie incroyable en effet.
This program was founded by Juliet Hartner Grant for Women in the Humanities. For more information on how to help finance fellowships at McNeese, contact the Foundation at 337-475-5588.
This program was also sponsored by the History Department of McNeese. To apply for a degree in history or other fields like, say, political science, contact the McNeese Admissions Office at 337-475-5504.
Thank you and goodbye.
Merci et au revoir.